Monday, July 15th. Welcome to our supporter stream. It is the middle of July, getting into the last half of summer, and we've got some big storms in the Midwest. So check it out. This is the development taking place across Iowa this afternoon. You can see that belt of stratocumulus, that's that low-level moisture right there in place. Dew points around 80 degrees. All the way from Bloomington up to Cedar Rapids, and big storms going up, tops up to 50 to 60,000 feet as of the last radar scan. The surface map late this afternoon looks very typical for late July. A polar front extending from the Great Lakes into the Central Plains. We do see that a lot during the middle of the summer. The boundary not particularly strong either. You can see temperatures on the north side of that in the 80s with 90s down to the south, so not a very strong temperature contrast. But those dew points right in here, you can see in the lower left of the plot, 80 degrees, all the way from Champaign up to Cedar Rapids, 77 at Des Moines this afternoon, only 72 at St. Louis, but out to the east looking at 74 in Chicago with 77 at Indianapolis. And that's important because that's the fuel that these storms will be feeding off of. Down there in Texas, getting some warm weather, 106 from Woodward down to 105 at Amarillo and 104 at Childress. That's part of that lobe of very hot temperatures rotating around the upper level anticyclone. Not so apparent on the surface map. We do have low pressure at the surface, but in the upper levels, yes, we do have high pressure across the four corners right there. There is a anticyclonic circulation right there, barely showing up, but it looks like it is centered maybe over, I'd probably put that over Roswell, New Mexico this evening. Anyway, we do have these little lobes of very warm temperatures, kind of like spokes, rotating around the north side of that upper level high. And some of that is going to work its way into Oklahoma and Texas Tuesday and Wednesday. Then we should see the heat subside in the central U.S., but more of it coming up for the western U.S. And over the next day or two, you can see how things evolve. The high migrates very slowly to the west. Looks like around this point it's actually centered right here. See, there's that clockwise circulation. And then we go into Thursday, and it settles right in across northern Arizona, so gradually shifting west into the western states, and a little bit more amplitude on that ridge as well. In the northeastern U.S., a highly convective environment. A lot of the area has fair skies, but we do have clusters of storms around Boston, a rather organized complex moving into Syracuse and Ithaca, and another complex of storms developing. They come together just west of Baltimore and Washington, D.C., and moving through the area this afternoon. Current temperatures quite warm, running 92 degrees at Albany, 96 at Newark Airport, and 95 at Philadelphia. So quite a bit of heat, 90s across much of the Northeast. Also some storms across Ohio and Indiana this afternoon. Heat advisories from western Maine all down the East Coast all the way to about Baltimore and Washington, and we do pick up excessive heat warnings through that area. Heat index is up to 110. In the southeast, we have an absence of upper-level ridging. So we've got even a little bit of westerly flow aloft. That combined with significant moisture means numerous air mass thunderstorms. You can see very little organization to all these cells. A little bit of concentration along the sea breeze. That's going to be these boundaries right here along the coast. But inland, it's rather random. Heat advisories and excessive heat warnings all down the coastal Carolinas. Heat indexes up to 111. Fayetteville, North Carolina, Greenville, it's going to be in this area here, and around 115 around Charleston, but the clouds are probably breaking that up a little bit. Heat advisories around Miami as well. and more heat advisories across central southern Alabama and the entire Mississippi River region. This entire area right there, heat indexes up into the upper 100s. Hopefully you don't find these regional summaries boring. I know they do kind of drag on. Everything's a heat advisory this time of year. If you like it, let me know. If you don't like it, likewise, if we need to keep things moving along, let me know as well. Looking at the south central U.S., yes, heat advisories again, this time focused on north and northeast Texas and the panhandles. That's related to that next lobe of heat coming around the upper level high, kind of migrating like this, moving southward at like 5 to 10 miles an hour, maybe 5 miles an hour. Very slow moving. In Oklahoma, we pick up the excessive heat warnings around Tulsa. It's actually going to be right in there. Heat index is up to 112 this afternoon, but we are going to be getting up to 101 at Oklahoma City. And it will be getting worse going into tomorrow. Little isolated storm out there, I guess around Syracuse, Kansas. But they will get more of those heat-driven thunderstorms, just enough moisture to get them going. Last night in Lamar, Colorado, very interesting. Let's take a look at that. So this is southeast Colorado. Here's La Junta, and here's Lamar. And this is the station we're going to watch. You can see some elevated showers, temperatures 77 degrees. The next hour, this is 3 in the morning. The next hour at 4 in the morning, temperature jumps to 95 with winds gusting to 42 knots, kind of a blast furnace there. What's causing that? Well, that's a heat burst. The atmosphere does not actually change much at nighttime. It cools from the bottom up as the radiational inversion sets in. So if you force the air above that radiational inversion down to the surface, it will heat up adiabatically and you'll get the same afternoon temperatures once again. That forcing, that happens from a downdraft collapsing on top of the nighttime inversion. So that's all that is. 5 in the morning, you can see those temperatures go right back down, and by 6 in the morning, dropped off to 76. So they are short-lived events. Now, we are going to get back to the Midwest and look at those storms. I'm going to save that for last so we have the latest information. Let's take a look at the southwestern U.S. Incredibly, heat advisories are gone for the Southwest. One little holdout around Farmington, New Mexico, and Albuquerque, they're expecting 101. But the lower deserts, they have cooled off, and they're entirely clear of problems. However, the upper-level heights at Albuquerque, they were up to 596 decameters. That puts it in the top 1% for that station. So still a very strong upper-level high, but just not really much correlation at the surface. Numerous showers in the Sierras. That's going to be dry thunderstorm activity. There might be some rain reaching the surface, but here there is a risk that we will set off lightning-induced fires and the outflow whipping those up as well. Also showers, thunderstorms throughout the Great Basin area into southern Utah. And we can see some storms popping off there on the coastal ranges east of Los Angeles and east of Tijuana. In the northwestern U.S., here we get into more problems with wildfires. And I think I just saw one little burst that looked pretty, yeah, that looks like a wildfire there. It's got kind of a dirty appearance on the visible imagery. We have red flag warnings all through this area, the coastal range, the Siskiyous, from west of Redding to around Medford. Drought conditions have developed. We could see more of those dry thunderstorms touching off fires. Air quality alerts all through southern Oregon. And we also have red flag warnings in eastern Idaho. Let's see what this is. This just appeared in the past hour. Yeah, I think that could be maybe pyrocumulus or maybe both, maybe a dry thunderstorm mixed with a intensification of a ongoing wildfire. Let's take a look at the fire map and see where that is. It appears that fire was taking place in this area north of Burns, Oregon. That's a little bit away from this other wildfire called the Falls incident. And just pardon me, we're going to, as I mentioned, get back to the Midwest. Let's kind of circle around, go up to Alaska. There's that North Pacific high. We've got some activity as well in southeastern Alaska, a branch of the polar front hanging through that area. Lots of rain, and they've had 3 to 8 inches over the past 3 days. Another 1 to 2 inches expected for today. Very high freezing levels have accelerated the melt of some of the lower glacier fields. That's adding to the rapid river flows. Very cool throughout the Alaskan interior, temperatures down into the 50s and 60s as some of that polar air from the Chukchi Sea, the Chukotka area, the Bering Sea rotates into the state. As we go east, some very warm conditions. We've actually got heat warnings all the way up to the Arctic Ocean. That's going to include the Mackenzie River Basin all the way up to Inuvik. Coppermine, they're up to 84 degrees. That is some significant heat. That's only 6 degrees away from 90. 82 right there. Not sure what station that is, and we've got 70s all the way back through parts of southwest Nunavut. Cooler temperatures up to the north. This is driven by northerly flow. And let's pan out to the east. Conditions look pretty normal out in the Labrador Sea. Let's drop down into southwestern Canada. We do have heat warnings down there as well. Temperatures up to 95 in some areas. We have heat advisories, or I should say heat warnings, throughout Ashcroft, Kelowna, Kamloops, and the same story out around Calgary. Maybe not for today, but later in the week. More heat warnings in northwestern Alberta, out towards Dawson Creek. And as we go out to the east, we've got this active front through the area west of Montreal, west of Ottawa, driving heat as well as thunderstorms. The heat is out ahead of the front, and the thunderstorms are along the front itself. So we do have a mix of heat warnings and Canadian thunderstorm warnings throughout that area. Also, the entire New Brunswick, Nova Scotia area under a heat warning, looking for temperatures up to about 88 and humidexes up to 100. So that is the grand tour. Let's return to this area and see what's going on. Here's a look at the mesoscale models from earlier this afternoon. This is showing the theta E, which is it's kind of a measure of the wet bulb temperature, or the kind of a combination of dry temperature and dew point. So let's take a look, and we do see a moisture axis right there from central Iowa into central Illinois. And this is advecting north with the prevailing wind. And this is pretty high, not only because we got deep tropical flow, but also because of the extensive irrigation of the Corn Belt region. This is a prolific source of evapotranspiration and evaporation itself right into the boundary layer. So let's go into the rest of the afternoon. This is a projection by the model towards 5 p.m., 6 p.m. This looks to be pretty well on track. You're going to see the radar shortly, but they are bringing a MCS into northwestern Illinois, propagating right into Chicago, according to this model. That's going to be around 9 p.m., and all the way down into maybe Quincy, Illinois. That's going to be the tail end right there. And going into the remainder of the evening, basically just moving on off towards the east and maybe looking a little bit more outflowish. But that will continue moving into Ohio and Indiana later tonight. And there it is. This is a little later during our production, towards early evening. SPC has a moderate risk of severe storms all across northern Illinois, parts of far eastern Iowa. All hazards are possible. Special emphasis on strong convective winds. We may very well be looking at a derecho situation with widespread damage. QLCS tornadoes are possible. Those are the briefer, weaker versions of supercell tornadoes. We probably already have that going on right here. That's going to be just east of Cedar Rapids. So if you're living out ahead of this line towards Chicago, Rockford, Davenport, you want to take all your usual precautions, as you would before a power outage, including getting your devices all charged up. And we could see that propagate further into Indiana and Michigan, but maybe a little bit less severe potential. Anyway, let's look at the animation. There we go. Yeah, it's surging on off towards the east-southeast, and the heavier elements are about to enter northwestern Illinois. Further down the line, there's the tail end Charlie cells. We did have a couple of tornado warnings earlier. This looks like maybe around south of Des Moines and further back towards Corning. Anyway, yeah, the main hazards further to the northeast, so it is going to be a very active night in the Chicago area and across parts of the Corn Belt. So checking out our forecast, there's that MCS moving into the Chicago area. 1 in the morning, propagating into Indiana and Michigan. Then by 7 in the morning, we're left with cells mostly near the intersection of the low-level jet and the front and the back end of that outflow boundary. So maybe some activity continuing through the night in Illinois. Then we get the heating for tomorrow, 1 p.m. Maps looking like this. We've still got a frontal boundary across parts of the Great Lakes and the Midwest. SPC has a slight risk of severe thunderstorms for tomorrow in the Central Plains. This is primarily on this section of the front, western Kansas, central Nebraska. Main hazards will be wind damage and some heightened hail threat in Nebraska itself. Also looking at a slight risk of severe thunderstorms from Burlington, Albany, all across Pennsylvania into West Virginia. So the remains of that other MCS propagating east and coupling with that heating as we get into afternoon. Another day of 100s across Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, possibly 102 in the capital city. And in the southern plains, that heat moves south, and this will be the hottest day of the week, Tuesday at DFW with 102 and possibly up to 105 at Wichita Falls and Childress. Abilene up to 103. Lots of storms in Colorado, propagating into Kansas during the evening. Then we set up for Wednesday. The front shifts even further south, looking at a marginal risk of severe thunderstorms on the central high plains out in this area here where we've got the upslope. Casper, Cheyenne, Denver, La Junta, Clayton. The Weather Prediction Center calling for a slight risk of excessive rainfall in the Sangre de Cristos, the upslope flow affecting that area as well. Taos, Raton, Alamosa, and a hot one in Texas up to the 100s, up to 102 at San Angelo and 100 at DFW. Numerous showers all across this frontal boundary right there. The upper level flow will be parallel to that boundary. That means the potential for training of cells, which increases the precipitation amounts, flash flood potential. So we're looking at a lot of 1 to 2 inch amounts and maybe a few over 3 to 4. Very nice weather up to the north, Minnesota, looking for highs of 75. Then we go into Thursday. Yeah, see, things are pretty active out west as well. Monsoon storms. It's going to remain active for maybe the next week or so. For Thursday and Thursday night, the frontal boundary moving into the southeastern U.S., a drier northerly flow through the Midwest region. And then just kind of a stagnant weather pattern going into the weekend. There will be some serious heat in the northwestern U.S., at Portland on Saturday, looking for 93 degrees, 95 at Salem, 102 at Medford, so not really quite as severe as what we had 1 to 2 weeks ago. Spokane will reach 102, 104 at Pendleton. And then we go into Sunday. You can see the monsoon activity in Arizona briefly. Sunday, we are looking at severe heat returning for the Great Basin area, looking for highs of 107 at Boise. The all-time record there is 111, and we're looking for 99 at Salt Lake City and Provo. And there's not much change going into next week. A little bit more rainy in Texas as that upper-level high shifts to the west. That's going to mean lower upper-level heights, and lapse rates a little bit steeper, so less suppression of showers and storms. Little front tries to come together in the northwestern U.S. and mostly affects the northern Rockies, but that's going to be about it. I guess we can look at this real quick. Pretty quiet in the Gulf. There's the surge of tropical moisture affecting mostly just the Western Caribbean, not really coming up north very much. So that will limit the moisture to some extent until we get into maybe later in July. Every time we look at other products, we lose some time. So let's go back to the radar. We're starting to get numerous tornado warnings breaking out. These are not confirmed. These are radar indicated. And a lot of this is due to rotation being detected. Like right there, I can see it on the reflectivity. That's pretty obvious, but also other signatures appearing elsewhere through the radar imagery. They're probably warning off of that. And certainly some severe winds along the length of this line. Anyway, about to move into the Quad Cities. We'll be into the Rockford area probably in the next hour, around the time you're watching this, and ultimately into Chicago. And there's potential for some impacts there in the Chicago metro. It depends on how far north the northern end ends up being, so we shall see. But down to the south, yeah, probably some major impacts through there. All right, let's move on and do our closing. I decided to go ahead and use that total eclipse footage from back in April around the San Antonio area. This is taken about, I think, 1:30, 1:40 p.m. And you're going to see the onset of that total eclipse. Anyway, it's just something different to look at. Hope you all have a great evening, and hope you enjoyed the program. Any comments, anything like that, just let me know. Thank you for being a supporter. We'll see you again on Wednesday. Bye-bye.